Welcome to Casey Cares, the voice of Kansas City nonprofits. We share the stories of local nonprofits and the people who drive them. At Casey Cares, we connect the nonprofit and the business sectors to enhance the quality of life in Kansas City for both our residents and our visitors. I'm your host, Ruth Baum-Biggis. Andrew Sander was a vibrant young man, full of life, with a personality as bold as his love for shoes. At just 21, Andrew was diagnosed with a form of lymphoma. After a difficult and far too short battle, he passed away only 7 months later. In the midst of unimaginable loss, his mom, Amy Sander, who's a creative force right here in Kansas City, found a meaningful way to honor Andrew's spirit. She turned his love of shoes into something that could give back. And Andrew's Shoebox was born. Now, just a year into this endeavor, this growing nonprofit is already making a powerful impact in our community. Amy joins us today to share Andrew's story, the heart behind Andrew's Shoebox, and how it's helping others one step at a time. Amy, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm sure I did not give enough love and background. Who was Andrew? Tell us about Andrew.
Oh my goodness. Andrew was just this, he was just an amazing person. Of course, I'm his mom, and every mom is going to be biased toward their own kids. And, but Andrew was he was special. He was such a good, kind-hearted, friend, son. We were definitely best friends. We had a special bond from the day he was born. I feel like that's a mother-son thing. I think that mothers and sons tend to have a unique relationship. He was, of course, ornery, even as a teenager. He was one of these kids that had it at every phase in life. He had a different kind of collection. So from the time he was like in second grade, he was very much into reptiles, amphibians, snakes, all the things. So in our home, we never had less than 27 random creatures.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that he cared for. So he was very much into that. He taught himself how to yo-yo and went to like yo-yo competitions. He learned it all from YouTube because that's what you do now. Learned how to yo-yo. He was very much into cars. Always had interesting little hobbies and things he was into. Shoes became one of those things, and it almost became more of like an obsession in a way. When he was in, I guess it was like his freshman year of high school, he asked me to go get in line at Oak Park Mall at like 4:00 in the morning because there was some limited edition, some shoe being released, and there were a certain number. And I had no idea that was even a thing, like that people did that, went and got in line for shoes. I mean, my mom did that for Cabbage Patch Kids, but I had no idea it was going to be like shoes. And I had no idea that there was this like underground world of shoe trading and all these things. And he just really got into it. And I still have in the basement, I think, 27 pair of his shoes. A good chunk of his shoes after he passed away, I allowed his friends to come pick a pair. He had the coolest group of friends, and they were friends like friends were in the 80s. I don't know if that makes sense, but like they weren't friends through social media. They weren't friends through like just texting. They were like friends. And, so I allowed them to each come pick a pair of his shoes to keep. But yeah, in high school, he was so funny. He would have the shoes that he would wear outside, and then he would pack in his backpack his shoes he wanted to wear for the day. And he would change once he got into school because he didn't want to wear certain shoes outside because they would get ruined. So, and he had a whole like shoe cleaning kit and like kept his shoes in such good shape. So yeah, he had this thing. I don't know. I have like 2 pairs of shoes, but he had so many. And it was just a thing that he loved. And yeah, so Andrew, I don't know much more to say about him. It's just he had such a good heart, so many interests and so many things that he wanted to do with his life. he worked at Discount Tire at this time in his life and just loved his job. He loved helping people. Um, he was one of those guys. I say inherited it from my father, actually, the ability to communicate with anyone, make friends with anyone, anywhere. He would spark up a conversation with a stranger. My dad taught him what I would say would be like old school manners. He most definitely opened doors. He most definitely said, sir and ma'am. He definitely ladies first. Like he was very old school manners that you don't really see much anymore. And
No.
I attribute that mostly to my dad. Andrew loved the mountains. That was actually probably of all things his biggest passion, even above shoes. We have a cabin up in the mountains, and he would go spend the summers with my dad and mom at our cabin. He loved fly fishing, loved all things nature. And so I think those summers were what kind of helped shape him into the young man that he became through that time with my dad specifically. But yeah, Andrew's plans after he was cured were to go move to the mountains and be a fly fishing guide. That's what he wanted to do after he was cured. So unfortunately, that did not happen, but he had a lot of wonderful memories out there in the mountains. So that's kind of our place that we go when we want to be like the closest to him.
What a wonderful young man.
Yeah,
If please share a little bit about his cancer journey then.
sure.
What happened? How, he's a young person.
Yeah. So on October 11th of 2021, I have to get the years right, 2021. Yes, 2021. He had not been feeling great. And I was actually participating in a local theater production at the time and was at a rehearsal. And I was texting with him on the way back, and I said, "Do you want me to grab something to eat on the way home?" And he was like, "No, I'm not really feeling very good." And I said, "Okay." So I got home, and he was laying on the couch, and he always lived at home with me. And I went downstairs, and he was laying on the couch, and he had been kind of tired recently. We didn't know really what was happening. He'd been kind of tired. He had been complaining about back pain a little bit, but he worked at Discount Tire, so it wasn't unusual for him to be
Right.
sore because he's lifting tires all day. Um, the one thing about him that made that night so obvious that there was something wrong was that he was very anti-medicine, anti-doctor. I could never get him to even take Tylenol or ibuprofen. It just was not, he just didn't want to do that. Doctors were a no always. So I asked him, I said, "Can you just tell me how you're feeling?" And his words were, "I feel like I'm dying." And I said, "Oh." I said, "We need to go to the emergency room then if that's really how you feel." And he agreed. And it was kind of at that point that I realized that it was something serious because he would have never agreed otherwise. So now this was, a year after COVID. And my first thought was, oh, he has COVID or pneumonia. That's just kind of the way your brain went at that
Right.
point. And he had COVID previously, so I was like, maybe it's lingering effects. At that point, we still didn't know a whole lot. So we went to the emergency room close by our house, which happens to be a hospital that's not an inpatient hospital. They just do outpatient treatment and have a wonderful emergency room. And you can usually get in really quick. So I was like, let's go there. And they immediately took him back to do like just a chest x-ray. They did COVID tests, flu tests, all the things. And we were sitting in there waiting, and it was like a moment that you see on TV or in the movies. And the doctor came back in, pulled out the stool and sat down and said, "Unfortunately, there is a large shadow around his lungs and heart that should not be there, and we don't know what it is. So we're going to need to send you by ambulance to the main hospital.
Mm.
And at that point, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning by that point, and I was panicking. He was confused. And I couldn't get a hold of anybody, which was probably the worst part at that moment because I was just needing to talk to somebody. I couldn't get a hold of, I did not want to call my daughter, who was at that point a freshman at K-State. She was a month into her freshman year. I didn't want to call her and worry her. I couldn't get a hold of my dad. I couldn't get a hold of my brother, couldn't get a hold of Andrew's dad. It was just this like panic moment. But got him transferred over to the main Advent hospital. And it wasn't long by October 12th at that point that we found out very quickly that it was some type of cancer. And it was very obvious to the doctors. And we went through all different kinds of possible diagnoses. There were so many tests. That first day was nothing but test after test after test. And Andrew, who didn't do doctors, it was a really, really hard day. The final diagnosis ended up being T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma, which is a very rare kind of lymphoma. And lymphoma and leukemia are very much connected. That's what they couldn't figure out, if it was a blood cancer or if it was a lymphoma. Ultimately settled on the lymphoma, and it was a large mass that definitely was centered and somewhat attached to his lungs and heart. So right in the center of his chest. And at the time they said, it was about the size of a baked potato. And they were shocked that he had not had any kind of major signs. They're like, it's so unusual for it to get that large without any major symptoms. And that, I guess it just kind of takes me to think that either he just had a massive pain tolerance and just thought he had like a back pain or something, or he really didn't have that many symptoms. I mean, he was working every day, all day in manual labor. So, but yeah, so that diagnosis came. And then from that point on, it was a living nightmare, honestly. So 7.5 months he fought, and we spent most of that time they transferred him to KU Med, and we spent most of that time at KU Med. He also ended up having some heart issues pretty much initially. So before they would even admit him into the cancer unit, he was in the heart center first, which at that point was the brand new heart center at KU Med. It was really nice. But we had to get that taken care of first before they would move him to cancer unit. And we spent, of those 7.5 months, I would say that 3/4 of it was spent in some kind of long-term hospital stay. And when I say long-term, I mean anything from a week to 3 weeks at a time. And then when he was home, we were going to the cancer center, essentially, for chemo 5 days a week, almost. And I did not leave his side the entire 7.5 months. I just couldn't figure out how to do that, So we had, it's weird to say now, but that 7.5 months was like the most beautiful time in our relationship because we went through so much together. And my daughter was coming back and forth from school a lot. That was really difficult. So his body just didn't respond to the chemo the way that we had hoped. And he had a steady decline, and it was spreading. And he just never quite responded to there. We had moments where it felt like things were getting better, and it just never got there. So we did one aspect of this that kind of leads into the Andrew Shoebox thing is that at one point we were trying to get approved for a clinical trial. Um, and it was a trial called CAR-T, which is
Hmm.
places. It was it was not a new kind of trial. It was a new kind of trial for T cells. It was used a lot for other types of cells, but for T cells, it had not been done much, and they would accept one person a month in the United States to be a part of this trial. And there were only 3 hospitals at that time that were doing the trial, because there weren't many hospitals that really knew much about what he had. And so one of those hospitals was Barnes Jewish Hospital in St. Louis. And we tried 3 different times to get accepted into the trial. And I still feel like if we had been accepted the first time, and the only reason he wasn't was because of a chemo med that he had been given that disqualified him from that trial.
Mm.
Um, I feel like maybe he would still be here, but you go through those scenarios in
I'm
your head.
sure.
There's no way not to. Um, but we finally got accepted into the trial in this time 4 years ago. So we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary of his passing, which was on May 21st. And so at this time, 4 years ago, we were in St. Louis, and what was supposed to be a 3-month stay, because we had anticipated that he would be accepted into the trial, no question. So we got there, and for whatever reason, timing wise, his body just stopped doing all the things that it needed to do to be accepted into the trial. You know, when you're doing medical trials, there's so many steps that you have to pass essentially to be accepted. And his kidneys started shutting down. And when his kidneys started shutting down and he had to go on dialysis, that put a really big halt on things. And at
Yeah.
that point, we still thought that he might get accepted if we could get those kidneys working. But they ended up doing radiation to try to break up the mass, to try to help that trial be able to work. They just needed to shrink the size of the mass because the chemo hadn't been doing that. And when they did the radiation, it ultimately then spread into his blood, which can happen. So then he went from just having lymphoma to also having leukemia. So it went into his blood, and so what would have been a 3-month stay, probably in St. Louis, where I had the ability to stay at Hope Lodge, which is a part of Andrew's Shoebox. I didn't really ever stay there, but it gave me a place to keep my stuff, which was so great. But we thought it was going to be long term, and that he would go back to Hope Lodge with me after the trial and stay there for healing, and then we would come home and everything would be great. Never in any of our minds did we think that this 22-year-old kid wouldn't survive. Because the doctors would say that too, he's young, never had a health problem ever before in his life. So we just
So
didn't.
you lost him,
Yeah.
which is unimaginable.
Yeah.
How did that become Andrew's Shoebox
Oh my goodness.
and your nonprofit effort?
Yeah. So, well, we ended up coming back to Kansas City in the last 2 weeks of his life. So it was really important to me that he be here. And after he passed away, you go through all the grieving, and it became really clear to me very quickly that I needed to do something, and I didn't know what it was. So I start going through in my head. I start going through all of his hobbies. Like, it's got to be something that connects to him. Frogs, no. Fishing. I was like, can I do a fishing derby? All these things, and I'm like, I wanted it to be something. I even went through some things like being a young adult with cancer, and the parent of a young adult with cancer is a very, very lonely place to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of people in that demographic that you see at the hospital, so it was very lonely. So then I started thinking, how can I help the hospital? And I went through so many different ideas. But 3 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, I thought, I had been to Operation Breakthrough because I work for an amazing organization called American Theater Guild, and we provide theater tickets for organizations and schools that are Title I schools or low income organizations to help take students and kids to see theater productions that they wouldn't get to see normally, like the Broadway tours that come to Kansas City. I had been to Operation Breakthrough and was just amazed. It is the coolest. Everyone needs to be familiar in Kansas City with Operation Breakthrough. It is the coolest place. And so I reached out to them and I said, I have this idea. My son loves shoes. Do your families need shoes? Like, is this something that would be beneficial? And because they do provide toys and books and clothes and all these things for their students and their families. And they were like, absolutely, because shoes are one of the things that people often don't think about donating, especially closed-toed shoes. A lot of times people, when they're cleaning out their closets or getting rid of all the things, and closed-toed shoes are really a priority, and children's shoes, down to like toddler size children's shoes are so needed. And so I thought this is a perfect way to tie in what Andrew loved and do something to help a local organization in Kansas City that I feel like is doing so many wonderful things. And so we started Andrew's Shoebox. A good friend of mine helped me with logo that has so many little like tie-ins to Andrew that are like little secret hidden messages in the logo. We put that together, and a year ago on his birthday, on January 19th, we had the launch event at Chicken and Pickle, and so many people came. It was the coolest, like, it was like a huge hug. It's kind of how it felt, like everybody was there. And since then, it's only been a year, we've collected almost 1,000 pair of shoes, which doesn't seem like a lot.
That's a lot of
shoes. For shoes, that's a lot. And so I collect shoes, brand new shoes or closed or gently used shoes. We're just specific on the closed-toed part because people need them for school, for job interviews. You're thinking about like adults that need to go out and interview. A lot of these kids don't have shoes, especially toddlers. These parents can't afford some of these necessities and things. And so I collect all these shoes and take shoe boxes down to Operation Breakthrough as I can. And it's been really cool. It's been fun to see unfold and makes me feel good to be able to do something that is something that Andrew loved and then give back to families that really need it.
So how can people in the public connect with you, get shoes to you, etc.? What's the best way to make the connection?
All the things. So because we're fairly new, I'm still in the process of making it a designated 501c3. So we're a nonprofit, but I'm working through all the 501c3 stuff.
All the fun.
And also all the other things, websites and all the things. So right now, I use Facebook and Instagram as a way to like spread information out. There is a Facebook group page where I documented Andrew's entire cancer journey. And that, I just want to make sure I say it right, so I'm pulling it up right now. That page is called Andrew Sanders Fight Against Cancer. And people can go there and see all the posts. Another way would simply just be to email me. And my email address, I can just tell you it now.
Absolutely, if you're okay with it.
Yeah, I don't care. My email address is Amy, AMY, .sander, SANDER, @gmail. And people can email me. I have a mailing list that's growing. So that's another way, like they can just email me and I can put them on the email list where I shoot out the events. We have a shoe collection on his birthday every year. So we just had the second one on January 19th at Chicken and Pickle. And I'll be doing another shoe collection drive this summer. So if people are interested in that, email and get on the list. Businesses or groups can also host shoe drives. My company did a shoe drive at our annual event last summer, and we collected so many shoes. I think people were so excited to use it as a way to like help them. I think people hold on to shoes and then you don't know what to do with them sometimes. So yes. I had so many people that were so excited to donate these shoes that belong to them. That's a way. There's also other ways we're trying to help at Operation Breakthrough in other ways. I'm going to set up a volunteer event this summer with a group of people to go unrelated to shoes, but go help volunteer at Operation Breakthrough. They have so many different needs for volunteers. And then Hope Lodge is also a part of Andrew's Shoebox. So that's where people can give financial contributions to Kansas City's Hope Lodge. And if people aren't familiar with Hope Lodge, it's run by the American Cancer Society, and it is a place where people whose family members are undergoing cancer treatment can go and stay, especially if you're in an away city. So for me, I stayed at the one in St. Louis. It's basically an apartment, and you have access to a full kitchen. You have access to other people going through the same thing. There's so many volunteers and resources there to help. And if your family member that's undergoing treatment is able to come stay with you either after treatment or during treatment, they are also welcome, and it's free. And Kansas City has an amazing one. And so financial contributions can be made direct while I'm in the process of still setting up the 501c3. People can just go direct to Hope Lodge website, and it's on the American Cancer Society's page, and they can link to the Kansas City Hope Lodge and then donate and label it as a donation through Andrew's Shoebox. So,
Amy, you're doing amazing work. I don't know how you do this as a mom, but what a wonderful thing. And I imagine Andrew is smiling and thinking, my mom, of course she would do something creative like this with shoes. So kudos to you and working with other nonprofits to make it happen. Yeah. Please go follow Andrew's Shoebox as they get up and rolling with all the quote unquote things you're supposed to have. Right. Take a little bit of time. So thank you for sharing. And we look forward to following all the efforts that you do in memory of him.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is not a journey I would wish on anyone, but it, as a mom, it feels good to do something to give back and is in his honor. So.
And thank you for joining us for KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications, which is also a nonprofit. If you want to be a guest on KC Cares, check out our website, kccaresonline.org, and spread the love. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. And don't forget, you can catch us Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on ESPN 1510 a.m. and 94.5 FM. Thanks for joining us on KC Cares.